I couldn't wait. Hey, it's Romania Black. Nope, couldn't wait. Nope, not after that. Not after that old business, Richard supposedly being dead. Nope, couldn't wait. I was like, are you kidding? So I'm like 95% sure that Richard is dead and Johan's killed him, or he's killed himself due to Johan's influence. But there is a 5% chance that those guys showing up at the counselor's door were just trying to lure the counselor into a situation where they could kill him and then maybe kill Richard. I don't know. I'm worried about Dr. Gillen because Jurgen's killed himself. I'm like, Johan is trying to erase any trace of people trying to convict him or suspect him, and it's very terrifying. So, But we need to talk about a few comments before we start this episode. I just couldn't wait. I was like, nope. I need to know what happens. I need to know what happens. And you know, the funny thing is, when I started this series, Anthony, a fellow patron who's been incredibly kind, gave me all of the files for this series, and they've been deleting them slowly one by one because I can get on Netflix and watch them now. But they gave me all the files originally to do this reaction set, and at the time, there was no way to find them anywhere. And so I was very, very grateful. And then shortly after I started the reactions, everybody's like, oh, they're coming to Netflix. And I remember someone saying, well, only episodes 1 through 30 are on Netflix right now. And I was like, huh. And that's where we are today. So since then, all of the episodes are on Netflix now. Although I've heard that the Netflix version is a bit problematic. It has changed some music due to copyright. It's not as good. So I'm glad that I'm seeing them through this lens. So thank you, Anthony, again, because that's very gracious of you and I appreciate it so very much. But it's funny that months ago when I was starting this series, I had in mind episode 30 because I remembered that's where Netflix cut it off. So this is where originally Netflix cut it off at. And I'm like, what would the cliffhanger be? Because I have a feeling that we haven't tied Tenma into all of this yet. That's the big thing. But we know that there is now a way for Tenma to get tied into it because he's going to Munich. He's looking for Johan. If he gets tied into Carl and Richard and all this jazz, what do we do with that? Are they going to try to blame Tenma for Richard's death? But I want to talk about some comments before we start. We were talking Tyrone. And I have, my dogs are like going crazy. Tyrone was talking about why we fear Johan but not Nina. Because yeah, Johan has killed Junkers, but Nina shot Johan. And I was like, well, I think that yes, Nina has shot. It kind of is interesting because what Tyrone was saying was going back to the discussion of Richard killing the boy, the 17-year-old boy. And does anyone deserve the right to be killed? And it's like, okay. And so it's a very interesting comparison because, yeah, by all accounts, Nina shot Johan in the face as a kid. Should we judge her similar to that 17-year-old kid that did all the murders? Now, all the murders. I will say Nina shot Johan in the face, but if I remember correctly, Johan kind of wanted her to shoot him in the face. I'm pretty sure he wanted her to do that. So there's that angle. And then also, she just witnessed him murder her parents in front of her. So there is a reason for that. The 17-year-old boy, did he even have a reason to rape and kill 9 women or 9 people and murder 2 others? I think it's a little different. I don't think you can tip the scales the same way. So there is that. But also, we've seen that Johan as an adult has premeditated some of his actions. Like, Tyrone did note that, yes, we cannot technically prove, as we've seen in this series, unless you have deliberate proof, we cannot prove technically that Johan is associated with the murders of the middle-aged couples. We can't prove that, just like how people are trying to suspect Tenma for it, but can't technically prove it. So, yes, that is a good point to bring up. However, we have seen him shoot Junkers straight up in the face. Did not have to do that, but he did 3 times. So there is that. As an adult, he did that. There was no need for self-defense. Junkers wasn't coming at him or doing anything, unlike Johan with Nina. So there's that. But also, we have seen that Johan has been orchestrating some things behind the scenes, or so we think, right? Or so we think. But I do think there is a difference between Nina and Johan. I think Nina, and what helps too is that we've followed Nina and have kind of got inside of her head. and seen, how she feels about actions. And we have literally seen her say, I don't want to do this. I don't want to resort to violence, but you are making me do this to protect myself or protect this person I care about. With Johan and Junkers, even though Junkers is the only one we've seen Johan technically kill, there was no reason for him to kill Junkers at all. No reason. Junkers was defenseless. He wasn't doing anything. He was freaked out, but he wasn't trying to attack Johan. He just killed him for no reason. So I think there's a big difference there. But again, it's going to get complicated. And as this last episode has shown us, the idea of why we resort to violence, why we do that, is very complicated. And the reasons for it are not a one-size-fit-all scenario. So I like that the mangaka is just kind of framing this as, yeah, we can't just say, oh, I'm just defending myself. There's a lot of layers. A lot of layers. But Tyrone, I'm glad you brought that up, because I was like, man, we're getting into some deep stuff here. And what's cool about it is the show doesn't frame it as deep stuff. It doesn't act pretentious about it. It just says, here's this stuff. You figure it out. And that's kind of what I love about this series, is that it just lays it all out there on the table, and you can get as deep as you want to get with it, but still follow the story. I appreciate Monster a lot for that. H Banana 7 brought out another complicating thing, in that Carl's foster father, in the episode where Carl, simultaneously accepts his foster parents, but also reconnects with his biological father, Carl's foster father notes, because you've been a wonderful son, that we love you. And H Banana 7 commented that, yeah, if Carl hadn't been a wonderful son, would he have loved him? And that's such a thing, right? So that gets into relating to Johan and Richard, like the idea of we have to be good people in order to deserve. I thought of My Hero Academia, because there's a character in that series that it's a superhero show, so it's about superheroes and villains. And one of the villains in that series says, well, the heroes only help good people. And I was like, ooh. Because yeah, it's true. Like, we as a society base on, are you a good person or a bad person? And if you're a good person, you deserve all the help. But if you're a bad person, we're not going to aid you and show you love. And I think that relates to the boy that Richard kills too, in that, yeah, maybe he needed some help. Maybe he needed some love, and he wouldn't have been in the situation that he was. Now, maybe not. Like, you have Jurgens, for example, who seems like, I don't know if love would have helped Jurgens out. I don't know if that is true or not, because he seems like he was unstable in a way that maybe it wouldn't have made a difference. But I think it's important to note that as a society in this series, there's emphasis on helping people who are good, and emphasis on abandoning or, just completely downgrading or casting out people who are bad. So, and I think Johan is trying to make a point with that, but there's a lot of complications and things that I'm like, okay, I get the point you're trying to make, but at the same time, actions have consequences, and there's this thing called trust, and what do we do with that? So that was really interesting to point out, Banana. I'm glad you did. And then finally, CR talks about how both Carl and Richard, their comment made me think about this, and I hadn't thought about it in this way before, but Carl and Richard, they're both struggling for familial acceptance. They are both struggling to get in touch with a family member and understand why they do or don't want to see them. Like with Richard, he wants to see his daughter, but he's trying to rationalize, why doesn't she want to see me? What can I do to see her? What can I do to reach her? And Carl is struggling with understanding, why did my father leave me? Am I worthy of his affection? Why or why not am I worthy? What do I do with this? So the fascinating thing is that they're both people struggling for familial acceptance. Both of them are connected to Johan, but Carl is not a threat to Johan. He starts out as a threat. Carl starts out as a threat because he's trying to figure out the whole thing with Edmund. But as soon as he's reunited with his dad, he's no longer a threat. So Johan kind of is like, okay, well, you're not bothering me or my agenda, so you can stay. But Richard's getting into my agenda. He has to go. Like, it's so fascinating, right? And I could not wait. I needed to see episode 30, and I may have regrets. Mm-hmm. But we'll see, right? We'll see. I'm excited regardless. Very much so. So, I've rambled on for 10 minutes. We need to get down to this episode and figure out what the hell's going to go on. So, with that being said, we are going to start Monster episode 30. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's do this, y'all. Oh, that episode was pure tension. Oh my god! These last 2 episodes, if the whole rest of the series just stays on this level, I'm going to be the happiest person in the world. Now, obviously, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think there's going to have to be some downtime so that our hearts don't explode from being just, oh my god, so tense. So tense. So tense. Ah! But yeah, I didn't understand the big man at first when they said, because I don't know, Ricardo didn't ever seem like a huge man when he was with Mueller, but maybe that's because Mueller was a tall guy too, so he never seemed like this big threatening guy. And so when they said big man paid him to push the Reichwine on the train, I was like, I don't know who that big guy would be. And because Johan's not a big guy, right? But then when it was like, okay, well, the big guy took care of, so Margot's probably dead. Margot is probably dead. The woman that would know who Johan was with Edmund, she dead, more than likely, and they've disposed of her body. So it's Ricardo. He's moved back to being Johan's right-hand dude. Oh! But yeah, no, it didn't hit me. And then the moment he comes in to do the cheating husband comes in to do the therapy session with the doctor, it's like suddenly, and we don't see his face, it's like, oh my god, it is Ricardo, and I'm terrified. Oh, Tenma being back, Tenma coming in like this white knight on a shining horse, like just comes in to save the day. I've never been so happy to see Tenma back in the story, because it's been a while. It's been since at least episodes 23 or 24. Like, it's been, a long time in the scope of the show, this whole arc we've had with Carl and them. I don't know what all we're going to talk about, because this episode went by very quickly. There was a lot of things happening. It was very straightforward, but it was just solid tension. Just absolute, again, this show has the ability to take side characters that you've known for the shortest amount of time, and suddenly you instantly connect to them, you root for them, you want them to do well. Like Richard, I was rooting for Richard's character so much, and he was gone too soon, and I was like, damn it. And the moment that Johan has him killed, it's like, okay. The moment he has him killed, it's like, well, now I'm afraid for Gillen, I'm afraid for Reichwine, I'm afraid for them because they're in danger. And I like these characters, so I don't want them to get hurt. And it just, So yeah, okay. Going through this. This episode may be one of my favorites in the whole series so far because of how perfectly executed it is. No pun intended, but how perfectly executed it is from start to finish. This episode, it built on itself. It was a mystery. It was solving things, giving us answers, creating new questions, and just absolutely just trailing us along. But it was so seamless. The thematic stuff with Richard at the beginning, it gets me because nobody on the police force came to his funeral, which is the saddest damn thing. We see the daughter. She looks a little bit older. I was wondering if she was going to be because we find out later he was 46. So she's probably in her early teens, the daughter is. So she had grown up a little bit, but it's so sad. It's so sad because the wife and the daughter, they're crying over him being gone. And it's it's so tragic because Richard was always wondering if his daughter actually loved him. The wife still seemed cold up until the end when she started to say that he was coming back to how he was before. And so there was always this question of if the daughter truly cared about him or not, or if she was so jaded and was just trying to appease him to have some closure. And we find out from the funeral scene that no, she did care about him and she didn't want to see him. And it's so damn tragic. And the fact that there was barely anybody there at the funeral, none of the police squad came. We do get the answer though, that he had been drinking on the force for a while. before he sought rehab. So going back to the last episode where it was like, okay, Johan says, well, you weren't drinking the night you shot the guy, but he had been an alcoholic and been drinking before. So that's a detail that gets added. Like, Johan seems to pick and choose what details he finds important for his argument, which makes for a good debater. Won't deny him that. Like, usually really good debaters are great at picking those little, like, I coach speech and debate. So I kind of know that a good debater can find little pieces of an argument that they can support and that can justify their claims. And if they can seamlessly argue those points without drawing attention to the stuff that's left out, you can make a pretty solid debate out of that. All you're banking on is that the other side won't call you out on it, right? That's what you're banking on. And so Johan so far has done a really good job as a debater of picking and choosing little details to support his claims and his arguments, and just ever so conveniently leaving out the other side of the story that maybe we don't need to address, right? Because that will defute his claims. So it's so incredible, and I feel so bad for Richard because, as we find out, I don't think it was a suicide. No, and neither does Rudy, and neither does the counselor by the end of it. Because, yeah, on the one hand, they say that he drank and fell off the roof. Fell off the roof. They don't say jump, which maybe it's a translation error. They don't say he jumped to his death, that he just fell off the roof. I'm like, come on. Gillen doesn't trust it because he's like, no, that makes no sense. He's wanted to see his daughter this whole time. That's why he came and saw you, Reichwine, to begin with. So suddenly his daughter's going to meet him the next day. He's going to get everything he's worked so hard for, and he decides to go drinking and die that night. Makes no sense. Like, even like someone that would be suicidal, the timeline doesn't add up. If he had met her and then jumped to his death, if he had met her and then celebrated by drinking and got drunk and fell to his death, that would have been much more convincing. I question whether or not Johan made a mistake by killing him so soon. And that is an interesting tie-in to Johan not understanding the bonds of a father and a daughter, understanding the bonds of love that two people can have. Because, yeah, if Johan had just waited a day, if he had just waited 24 hours until Richard had been able to see his daughter face to face, and then confronted Richard, and then had him drink and fall off the roof, then I think it would have been much easier to sweep under the rug, and I don't think Gillen or the counselor would have been nearly as suspicious or would have pursued finding the truth nearly as much or as hard. But Johan doesn't seem to understand those bonds, and maybe doesn't understand what that means to have that love between two individuals. So he can't, because he doesn't understand it, or at least that's what we think so far from what we've seen, he can't understand it or process it. So he didn't even take that into account. He just saw that Richard was a threat. He has to go now. This is the time to do it. That seems to be the case, right? But I feel like that was a miscalculation, because now Gillen is suspicious, and so is the counselor, because the timeline and the emotions involved don't make sense, right? So I'm glad. I felt bad, like I said in the reaction, I felt bad that the counselor, that Reichwine, we finally get his name, that he felt bad for Richard dying, and what did he ever do for him? But I'm like, I don't know what else he could have done. He was there to listen to him and motivate him and encourage him, and I get that he feels guilty because he told Richard, he's like, oh, well, you're cured now. You're fine. That may have been, in the moment, too much to say, but I don't think that had any impact on what happened to him. I think that he was in a good place. He was getting back to where he was, and then that's when Johan struck. So it just wasn't within his capacity. So I don't think the counselor should feel bad about it, but I feel like that spurs him on. That gets him to get more invested in finding out the truth for Richard's sake. And Rudy is like, we need to get Tenma involved because Tenma can help bust this wide open. We need to get him in this. I'm so glad he's back. He's like, this was not a suicide. We need to find out what's going on and go from there. He's like, Richard was his old self. He's like, don't blame yourself for this. So yeah, I love that we open up after the intro. What this episode is so beautiful in doing, and one of the reasons why I love it so much, is that everything connects and has a reason to exist in this episode. As soon as we cut back from the OP, we have Reichwine working out in the gym, and we get the impression that he's been doing that a lot. And it's a very show don't tell scene, because we're like, oh, okay, he's working out. He's the Rocky theme is playing. He's gearing up to go help, try to be on his guard for Richard, and clear his head, figure out, sometimes people run and exercise to clear their head. I do that a lot. You just do it to kind of keep yourself, in shape. But we find out later that there's more to it than that. We find out there's a reward for you as the audience. You see him working out after the OP, and then later when he goes into the alleyway and just beats the hell out of those two guys, he reveals that he's worked as a police surgeon on the police squad. And you're like, oh, he has a history with the police department. He has a history with, dealing with this sort of thing. So it's cool that little reveal happens, and you're like, oh, he's not just working out. He's staying in shape to handle this situation. So badass. And I love that it explains why Richard came to him, why he respected him so much. If he had been with the police force and working on the sides, helping them for years, Richard had probably already built a rapport with him. And so when this happened, he came to him for guidance. Makes so much sense. This wasn't just some random counselor. It's someone that had history with the police force and with Richard. Love it. But I love that this opening shot of him running in the gym, in the workout room, the rec center, it all ties back around and gives credibility to when he sees the guys in the alleyway, when he runs away, multiple times in this episode. It all just adds up and it connects. And it's so freaking amazing. I love it so much. Decision. Yeah, the decision to pursue the case with Richard. Because, yeah, I think that both Rudy and Reichwine understand from knowing that Richard's death is not an accident. They're realizing that Johann is not someone to mess with. He maybe has connections, and this is a very dangerous and delicate situation. So they're making the decision, because they have the option to walk away. They could walk away and not pursue this, right? I think him going to the police department and trying to find Margot, I think that got Johann to be like, okay, you've got to go. You're starting to dig too deep. I feel like that's the case. I think if he had just let it go and didn't pursue it, maybe Ricardo would not have come after him, right? I'm worried about Gillen. I'm worried about Rudy, because I think Rudy's going to be targeted as well. But I feel like they make the decision to carry on Richard's search and his investigation, and that's what's causing all these things to happen. I do love the woman that's just going on and on about her husband not talking to her because she suspects him of an affair, and she's like, all he does is wash the car and mow the lawn, and it's just like, oh no, he's doing duties for you as a husband, and okay. I like that, so far we've seen Reichwine where he's only been with Richard, and their conversations have been this very deep, emotional, impacting moments or set of moments. And then we see what he does with his other patients, and you can kind of see why he built that camaraderie and relationship with Richard, because Richard, was dealing with some deep stuff, and this woman's just worried about her husband and this, which granted, an affair is a big deal, but she's so whiny about it. I don't know. There's just something about her that I can see why he was just kind of distracted, right? And so he's like, oh, well, yes, I'm listening. And then he's going back, but his mind is elsewhere. Reichwine is thinking about the case, the bottle. He was on building 12 of the University of Munich. Yeah, just randomly there, right? His fingerprints were on the bottle. But I'm like, wouldn't Johann's fingerprints be on the bottle too? Did you not dust for the other fingerprints as well? It's just like they are conveniently, the bartender, all of them are conveniently leaving Johann out of the equation, because it's like out of sight, out of mind. If we don't mention Johann, he's like Bloody Mary. If we don't mention him 3 times in front of the mirror, he won't appear, right? If we don't mention him, he'll leave us alone. But the cat everything, the rock whiskey, that was such a amazing twist. And we'll get to it in a second, but I do love whenever, I like that while Reichwine is contemplating what's going on. The episode, another great thing about the episode is it takes its time to let things settle. Like, it shows him here contemplating everything that's been going on. He's just sitting there in the rec center thinking about it, what he needs to do, what needs to happen next. And it's this beautiful moment of just silence. And it lets it simmer for us, the audience, what's coming. It's a nice little, it's a little pocket of time. And it's not filler. It's just letting that emotion sink in, and it's letting everything bubble and start to simmer and start to come to the surface, right? So I love that. I love this show whenever it has moments of silence and quiet and reflection. They're not filler moments to pad time. They are just moments to give actual emotional weight and let it sink in. Mwah. Beautiful, 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 beautiful. And so he's thinking about what to do. Him going to the bar scene, like the bartender, I wonder if he's been paid off by Ricardo or them to not mention Johan. Because it's like, come on, you remembered him in the bar. Granted, he says that he does remember him ordering coffee, and that made him stand out because who orders coffee late night at a bar? But I'm like, he was arguing with Johan for like an hour there. Like, you really didn't remember him? Johan stands out because he's so pretty. Like, you really didn't remember him? Come on. But I like that the moment he says he was drinking coffee, Reichwine seems to like light up like, oh, he wasn't drinking here. He was still following, his commitment to not drink. Okay. And then he says he buys the bottle to go. And I'm like, no, Johan bought the bottle to go. So that's already a messed up memory. But that reveal about the rock whiskey is so good. It's so good detective work. It's such a great mystery reveal of being like, no. And then we see that at one point, Richard did relapse. He did drink. And the counselor was like, come on, what are you doing? And he's like, oh, I don't drink that domestic cheap stuff. I go for real Scotch whiskey. And it's like, that's such a great detail. And Johan wouldn't know that, right? That moment was so freaking badass and amazing. I loved it so much. It was such a great reveal. And so then the train. I don't want to get near a train station ever again. I never want to get near a train station because in this series, people keep trying to push people in front of trains. And I'm like, why? Why are we doing that? Gah! What are we doing, show? It's like, what are we doing? Oh my God. I love it so much. I love it so much. But yeah, that moment's so freaky. And then I was like, get you some, counselor. Get you some Reichwine. You go after this guy. Like, he is not afraid. Again, I love that this episode builds up his character from being just this like guidance counselor, this therapist that is just trying to help Richard, to being like a full-fledged character, like taking up the mantle of solving Johan's investigation from Richard. It's so damn good. And I'm like, yes, get you some. And he just goes after the guy in the bar, like unafraid. It had like a very Dieter vibe, like when Dieter went into the bar and like drank the drink and was like, peace out, like to get his stuff on Tenma. It had that same energy. And then I got worried because he was getting beat up in the alleyway. And I'm like, don't kick this old man. Like no, I underestimated Reichwine a lot. I underestimated him. I thought that I underestimated him, thought he was going to get injured, thought that things were going to go bad. And he just goes and like headbutts him and beats them up. Dude, I love it. I love that he proves himself in that moment. Of being like, no, what does he say there? He's like, I've trained with the Border Patrol. He's like, so he has history. And the Border Patrol, I'm wondering if that's going to tie into Johan too, because Johan and Nina came from the border, right? So is there some tie-in there? We don't know. Is there some history there? He's like, why'd you try to push me off? And he's like, don't underestimate a former police surgeon. I'm like, damn. He's like, I was hired by a big guy. I just like that these thugs are strong-armed into helping Johan through Ricardo or whatever. But there's that trace of fear there that they don't want anything traced back to them. It's so fascinating, right? He told me to push you off. And I'm just like, I'm going to get a shot of that. I love Reichwine just picking up the glasses, putting them on his head with all the scrapes and bruises, just like, bitch, please. Like, Oh, Reichwine. I love his character, and I love what he does in this. It's so good. It's so good. I just absolutely love it. It's fantastic. And then him going to Richard's grave with all the flowers, 1951 and 1977. So yeah, he was 61, 71, 81, 91, just 46 years old. And I love that where he just leaves the open bottle of real Scotch whiskey there, being like, now you can drink. Just my heart. And that, I was getting worried when he was like, I love the moon casting over, like the moon shadows, the clouds shadow the moon, and he's in darkness, and he's like, leave it to me, I'll figure out Johann's identity. And then the moonlight comes back up, and we see Tenma has been following him, and he's just like, okay. Tenma just walks up like, what shit's been happening while I've been gone? What's been going on? I left Dieter with Heckle. What's happening? And so what I love, too, is, again, this episode does a really good job with setting up the tension, because with Miss Merez, it's been a thing throughout the entire episode of Miss Merez and the unlocked door and the window and everything. Like, her whole thing was she kept keeping the door unlocked, and it makes you as the audience think, oh, God, what is going to happen? Because she's kept the door unlocked. What are we going to do with that? What's going on? You know, you just kind of get this sense of unease by what's happening. And so then she locks the door and you feel a little bit safer. But then when it comes down to Ricardo showing up, you're like, oh, I hope she kept that door unlocked. But you just don't know for sure, right? You think that something bad could happen. That whole thing of the unlocked door and then like the window being pushed open and the vase falling, it gives this sense of dread and uncertainty, and you just feel like your inside squirm because you think something bad's going to happen, and then it turns out that one little detail of not locking the door that you think is going to lead to something bad happening actually leads to something good happening, and you're like, okay, good, she left the door unlocked, and so that allowed him to escape. The setup and payoff of that little detail is so well executed in this. It's absolutely incredible. And then she talks about like going on the date and everything. Now, I love Rudy saying, let's discuss our memories of cheating from Rudy. And I was like, I love that little thing in the classified is like the perfect little tease because only Tenma will understand what it means. I love it. And he's like, don't do it. And I love that Rudy is trying to keep Reichwine from doing anything rash. And Reichwine's like, well, I need to go find Margot, the fake prostitute, to see what she knows about the man that came with Edmund, because Richard was certain that it was Johann, and I want to confirm that. Well, she's dead, so there's no need to confirm that now. Not gonna work. I am glad that now Reichwine is with Tenma, though, because that means that he possibly will be able to tell Tenma about everything with Richard, and Tenma can start to piece together everything. I'm all about it. This show, though, we go like to the red light district, and there's just a giant sign that says pussy in big glowing letters. I'm like, it was a different time in the 90s. It has a very like the porno chic era kind of like lingering from the 70s into this, right? Has a lot of connections to that. And this girl with the side ponytail, very 90s, talking about the woman, the old hag going with the big man. Yeah, being like, yep, she did. She ain't gonna be around no more. And then the counselor trying to figure it out. I know he's not a counselor, but I like calling him that because that's kind of what Richard depended on him for. And so the question is, did Ricardo and them... did Ricardo just find out? The big question is, how did Ricardo find the information from Hess about the cheating husband? Like, how did he get that information? That is the one mystery I have from this episode. And I don't want to know the answer, so don't tell me. But my one question going forward is, Hess had been making these appointments with the guidance counselor and telling him this information, unless there was like a wiretapping device, or unless she was questioned outside of the office by Ricardo, unless Ricardo had like saw that she kept visiting him and like tried to pry information out. How I don't think he's actually her husband. So how did he find that information out to come up as Mr. Hess and pose there? That is the one question. Like, how did he get there and was able to pose if that wasn't the case? Because he says, I'm Hess. My wife made an appointment for me. Like, he's like, I'm going to try questioning that woman again tonight. Yeah, to go see her. And then, yeah, the moment we saw those hands, and Ricardo kind of has like an olive skin tone. Like, his skin color is very distinct in this show. And so he's like, this is my first counseling session. And Ricardo is terrifying. He's terrifying because he instantly, like, he slowly reveals that he's a murderer. But we, the audience, know he's a murderer. And so we're waiting for the shoe to drop. And he slowly, like, dangles it in front of Reichwine. And then he's like, well, I killed my wife, or I dreamt of it. Like, I've had these dreams. It's just the whole tying to Reichwine's dreams. He's like, I don't feel at home, so I mow the lawn and wash the car. So is he actually posing as her husband? I don't know. He's like, how does that make you feel any better? Because he knows a lot about what she's talked to him about. So he's like, I don't even talk to my wife at all. So I'm like, is he like Johan? Johan's been posing as someone's son this whole time. Is he just posing as this woman's husband just to be close to where he can commit these crimes? I don't know. Or is it all a lie and he's just pried her for information and gone there to pose? There is an opportunity to talk even when you want to. He's like, I'm not sure if that's it. But he's like, what about her? And he's like, what about the woman you had an affair with? He's like, oh, I killed her. And he's like, what? He's like, I mean, I dreamt that I killed her. He's like, do you have these kind of dreams often? He's like, often? Not lately, I haven't. And just like the conversation, I was so floored that Ricardo was there and nervous for Reichwine that I wasn't correctly maybe thinking of the conversation and detailing it. I was just, my brain was going, get out, because this is a very bad scenario. You're in danger, like red flags and lights are blaring. But he talks about being lonely. Ricardo says that I was lonely. And Reichwine's like, go on. And I wondered, like, Reichwine's been watching him the whole time, and we know from Richard that he can read people in a look. So I feel like the moment he sat down, Reichwine was like, there's a red flag going off. Something's not right. What do we do? And so he's just sitting there like, and that's why you had an affair, because you were lonely. And that's when he stops and says, no, it was after I met him. And he's like, him? A beautiful boy with blonde hair. And Reichwine's like, well, shit, no, this is bad. Red flag, red flag. No matter how many people I killed, or even if my country was destroyed, everything inside of me felt like a dream. Like nothing seemed real. Like the murders and the atrocities that happened to him didn't seem like they had any tangibility. But after I met him, things changed. And I love that there's the sunlight glaring in Reichwine's lenses, but you could see the terror in his eyes, like, shit, I've just connected the dots, and this is not good. Saying everything began to seem real, and I was no longer lonely. And he's like, well, damn it, this is not good, y'all. And him just looking so fondly in that moment. Kind of like Jurgen's, like Johan gave a presence and tangibility to these thoughts or emotions that Ricardo has. So it's clear Ricardo deeply looks up to Johan and is like, you kind of became my anchor. And I'm like, well, that's good. That's nice. That's good to know. And then just like him just looking at the counselor being like, would you like some tea? Like the moment he looks at the counselor, like, do you know I'm about to kill you? It's like terrifying. And then he's like, oh no, I don't want any tea. And he's like, well, I'm thirsty. I'm going to go make some anyway. And he starts following him. I was like, oh my God. Nope. Big nope. And the thing of it is, is that the thing of it is that in this moment, it's so tense and so realistic that Reichwine is like walking through the rooms, like still talking, still trying to distract Ricardo, not letting him know that he's terrified. And he's looking at all the doors. He sees the one door's latch shut. He's like, there's no way I can get to that door and get out in time. I can't unlock it and get out before he catches me. That's a no-go. But he's trying to like, it's so tense because he's trying to like rationalize and figure out what steps to do next. And Ricardo is just slowly stalking after him, like so calmly and collectively. It is terrifying. And I was like, oh, fudge, hell no. And so him going like to the tea room and then him just standing there. What was so terrifying is that he's just standing there watching the teapot. Like, what do I do? This man could kill me. How do I go about this? How do I move forward? And Ricardo's just sitting there like not worried. Like, what are you going to do, old man? Like just biding his time. He's like, in a job like yours, many difficult things must occur. After all, you do learn about people's dreams. Nothing good can result from learning about dreams you shouldn't know about. He's like, you know too much. You've picked up too much information and nothing good can come of it. I'm like, oh my God. And him being like, I hope. He's like, especially learning that I'm a murderer. And I love that the first reaction you'd have upon Ricardo saying that is to take the teapot and just smack him in the face with it, right? But that doesn't buy him time. Instead, Reichwine's like slowly like pouring the cup of hot water, being like, okay, what do I do? What do I do? What do I do? I see that door open. God, I hope she didn't lock it because I'm going to throw this cup in his face and buy myself a few extra seconds. He's like, if you intend to start over with your husband and wife, you should think talking things over. And then I love that he just like throws the hot water in his face and just bolts. But he has the gun and he goes to shoot him. And then that's when Tenma fires the gun. I love it. And it was a warning shot. That's the thing. Tenma, I don't think Tenma's going to shoot Johan. I don't think he's going to shoot to kill him. I could be wrong, but because he had the chance to shoot Ricardo, and instead it was a warning shot, being like, don't you dare. And the fact that it's Tenma staying there, he's like, you're Dr. Tenma. And he's like, I've been watching over for you a while. You're being targeted. And he tells him to keep running to get out of there. Oh my God. I'm so glad Tenma's back in the story. I'm so glad he's back. I'm so happy. But I'm like, now the shit's hit the fan and you all expect me to wait, which is not going to happen. I'm like, no. I'm definitely excited for your comments. I'm definitely going to read them for sure. As long as you don't spoil me, I'm going to read them. But this story's gotten so good and I'm so hooked. And now the mystery of trying to like uncover Johan, reveal who he is, even if nobody's going to listen. That's the thing too. It's like they have all this information, all this proof, all this evidence just sitting right there in front of them. But the police doesn't care. Nobody's listening. And so it's like, is it even going to matter? But it's like the truth needs to be uncovered. So I really thought for a hot second that Reichwine was going to die. And he may still die. I thought he was going to die this episode. I was so nervous. And then Tenma showing up like a friggin' knight on a white horse is... I'm so glad he's back in the story. I want Tenma to be told everything so he can piece together things. I need that information to be relayed to him. Oh my God, y'all. Gah. So yeah. This episode was amazing. Like I said, this is episodes 29 and 30 have maybe been two of my favorite episodes so far in the whole series because of how tense they were, how amazing were. But episode 30, this one has been the most rewarding. Because it's like, yes, Richard has died, which is horrifically sad and tragic. But Reichwine has taken up the mantle of trying to uncover everything. He's capable. And he has Tenma there now too. So what do we do with this, y'all? What do we do with this? But I'm excited. I hope y'all are too. So I will be so excited to dive into the next episode, but I can't wait to hear your thoughts down below. So in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more monster. Bye.